everyone. We're group Eastern Standard Time 2. I am Taylor. We also have Grace, Hannah, Chelsea, Valencia, and Alondra. And we will be talking about the effects of technology breaks on media multitasking. The first thing that we're going to discuss is the literature. Some of the literature that we have promotes what media multitasking is. It's really just the use of 2 or more media types during a specific time. So for example, if you are texting as well as watching an educational video, you are engaging in media multitasking. There are multiple reasons why somebody might do this. For example, maybe you're texting your friend for social reinforcement, or maybe you are texting that friend to escape a assignment that you're doing. So maybe the assignment is really hard and you need a break, so you're escaping that. Other things that are shown in the research are that when you are engaging in media multitasking, this can lead to lower performance on exams. So for example, some research has shown that with the higher rates of media multitasking and the lower rates of studying due to that, the mean exam score might roughly be like 70% lower. Continuing on with literature, it is recommended to use tools to help promote that on-task behavior. Some of those tools might be a visual schedule. This would include a schedule that would let you pick which choice of task you want to do first, and then it lets you neatly organize that. Other things might be that technology can be beneficial when used in moderation. So for example, a digital device can be used to help promote that self-monitoring of it. As you will see as we go through this presentation, we did use a digital app to allow us to go ahead and promote that self-monitoring ourselves.
The purpose of the study was to evaluate the effects of technology breaks on media multitasking during independent study time. A multiple baseline design across participants was used in this study with the 6 graduate students. The intervention involved teaching participants to implement non-contingent technology breaks, allowing them to check their text messages, their email, social media during their technology breaks. This study serves as a demonstration of how one could address media multitasking from a behavior analytic perspective.
Now for the method section. For the participants, we had 6 participants whose names are Alondra, Chelsea, Grace, Hannah, Taylor, and Valencia. Each participant was in graduate school working on their master's degree, and all are females between the ages of 23 and 26. Each participant used a designated study space in her home. But all of the homes are all over the Eastern Standard Time Zone in the following states: North Carolina, Indiana, Florida, Ohio, Georgia, and Michigan. The materials needed for this study were study materials such as a computer, textbooks, notebooks, pens, papers, etc., as well as a cell phone with the Focus Forest app on it, and a stopwatch, which was also used on the cell phone. We defined 2 behaviors in our study. The first is off-task behavior. We define this as using technology, including computers and phones, for any social media, texting, watching non-academic videos, and browsing the web during study time for at least 5 seconds. Examples of this include texting a friend and posting on social media, while non-examples include emailing a professor and navigating Canvas. On-task behavior was defined as studying, working on an assignment, watching academic videos, or emailing a professor for at least 5 seconds. Examples of this include reading a textbook, taking notes, and writing a paper, while non-examples include emailing a friend and doodling.
So for data collection, all of the participants recorded their own baseline and intervention data. So we also recorded each participant's inter-response time to calculate the breaks. So we individualized each participant's on-task to off-task ratio in order to start the intervention phase. So during the intervention phase, to record data for on-task behavior, we utilized the Focus Forest app. And then for the intervention phase, we recorded the duration data for on-task behavior and then recorded each participant's IRT. So all data for both of the phases were recorded in a Google Sheet, which all 6 of us shared. So for baseline, the behavior being observed was the amount of off-task behavior during designated study time. Each participant studied for 1 hour in their designated study area. So we each set a work timer for 60 minutes, and each participant reported off-task behavior by using the smartphone screen time data report, which is available on both iPhone and Android phones. The screen time data was used to calculate each participant's IRT. So for the intervention, this consisted of implementing specified technology breaks during the designated study time. So each participant would set a work timer using the Focus Forest app for a set amount of time, which was determined by each of our IRT. We also set a technology break timer for 1 minute, which was started as soon as the work timer ended. So during this time, we were able to engage in off-task behavior, such as sending emails, texting friends, social media, anything like that. And this continued throughout the hour of study time, and the work timer increased due to each participant's IRT.
So for our IOA, we calculated it for our intervention data by using a total count formula. Each participant took screenshots of the screen time function in their phones and shared it with a partner in the group. This partner compared the number from the screenshot to the number the participant entered in the shared spreadsheet. And then we took the mean of everybody's independent IOAs to come up with our mean IOA for the entire study, which was 92%.
So then we went over treatment fidelity. For treatment fidelity, we created a checklist for both baseline and intervention phases. So that included all the steps that we needed to take in order to do that intervention phase or baseline phase. So for example, here we have 7 steps. We would take the number of steps completed correctly over that 7 steps and times that by 100. As an example, this one is Hannah. For baseline on the 14th of June, she did all the steps correctly. So she would have 7 over 7. We times that by 100. So 100 times 100 is still 100. That sort of thing. It is all still, this is what we did for both baseline and intervention. So all of us received 100% treatment fidelity for all of the baseline. However, we all received a 92% of treatment fidelity for the intervention, and we will discuss that in limitations as we go on with this presentation.
This figure presents the duration of technology breaks of multimedia use for the 6 participants. The participants recorded their baseline data, and once it was stable, they proceeded into the intervention phase, which was the use of participant-implemented technology breaks. A visual analysis of the multiple baseline graphs indicates a decrease in the amount of technology breaks during the 6 participants study hour. This figure breaks down the baseline mean and range for each participant, as well as the mean and range for the following, for the intervention as well. Alondra's baseline data showed a mean of 13 minutes spent on technology during her hour-long study session with a range of 7 to 21. Following the intervention phase, Alondra's mean decreased to 0.7 minutes spent on technology breaks with a range of 0 to 2. Final results indicate that Alondra had a 94.6% decrease in the usage of technology breaks during study time. Alondra demonstrated the highest level of improvement during the intervention. Meanwhile, the participant who differed the most from Alondra was Grace, whose baseline data showed a mean of 10.8 minutes spent on technology during her hour-long study session, with a range of 8 to 17. Following the intervention, Grace's mean decreased to 3 minutes of off-task behavior, with a range of 0 to 8. Overall, Grace had a 72.7% decrease in the usage of technology breaks during study time. All participants exhibited a decrease in their technology usage following intervention, indicating that the intervention was successful for all 6 participants. Participants found this intervention to be effective and appropriate for decreasing off-task behavior during study
time. For our conclusion section, the replication of this study, each participant engaged in self-implemented technology breaks. Breaks were calculated according to each participant's baseline data. Each participant implemented these breaks at their own homes in their designated study space, and we recorded the data onto a shared Google Sheet document. Each participant also graphed their data and shared that with the group in the Google Sheet. So after reviewing all the data collected by each of the participants, it's evident that the self-implemented technology breaks were effective in limiting media multitasking in regards to off-task behavior while studying. So while the self-implemented technology breaks have shown a decrease in media multitasking, limitations and recommendations for future replication will be covered in the next few slides.
For this section, we're going to discuss the various limitations that we encountered while completing this replication study of our original research study. So as a whole, these limitations for replication did encompass 3 distinct categories. So these were methodological limitations, technological limitations, and ambiguity limitations. There is some times where 2 or even all 3 of these limitations interact into one of these factors. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of break these down on exactly what these limitations mean and how did these potentially affect our data that we achieved through completion of the study. So the first limitation that we encountered as participants beginning this study was in regards to methodological limitations. So specifically, this was our data determination. So when we were each individually calculating our inner response times and our add-on durations, all of our calculations resulted in numbers with decimals. However, in the original study, they only used whole numbers. As a result, we individually had to make a call on how are we going to round our data to make them a whole number. So some of us may have rounded up, some of us may have rounded down. It kind of differed because the study did not explicitly state how they rounded or even if they rounded these numbers. So there was the potential that the original authors rounded down every single participant's numbers, rounded them up, or maybe they did the 5 and above, give it a shove procedure that we learned in grade school. So it was kind of unclear on how do we get to a whole number. As a result, that could kind of skew our data a little bit. It's not too big of a limitation at this stage, but it was something that still should be noted. However, this kind of infiltrated into a technological limitation of the Focus Force app timer itself. So once we kind of started to familiarize ourselves with this application in our smartphones, we quickly learned that the timer only worked in multiples of 5 minutes. So we had to once again round our data to a multiple of 5. So for example, if my inner response time was 12 minutes, I then have to make a decision, am I going to round it up to 15 minutes? Am I going to round it down to 10? And we each individually had to make that call. This second rounding was not included in the original study at all. So this further kind of can skew the data from that original inner response time a little bit further than that initial rounding. And so what this kind of means potentially is it can affect our reinforcement schedule. So for example, if You chose to round down. You chose to round down your 12-minute IRT to 10 minutes. You are engaging in reinforcement a little bit quicker than what you normally would have if you maintain that 12 minutes. So there's the potential that you have a lower amount of multimedia usage during your intervention phase because you're getting it essentially for free a little bit quicker than what you normally would. The other side of the coin is you chose to round up to 15. Maybe that is just too long for you to go without looking at a phone or looking at a computer or a tablet. And as a result, you may experience a higher amount of multimedia usage during your phase. So it's a little bit harder for you to access or wait for that reinforcement. So those two kind of things can help explain why there could be a skewing of data if there was one to occur. Another area of limitations in terms of ambiguous information was actually in the smartphone screen time display. So this kind of infiltrates into the technological limitations as well. So what this means is that 5 of us had an iPhone and 1 of us had an Android. When we were sharing screenshots of our IOA data, it may have been unfamiliar to see another phone's application of what the screen time looks like. How did they calculate it? Understanding and grasping, how did we get here? What are they taking into account? That could affect your number of IOA that you achieve. Another factor with the screen time, which really made it ambiguous, was, especially for our iPhone users on our team, was there were intervals of like 15 minutes. So there weren't individually minutes or by 2 minutes. It went up by 15, then 30, and 45. Made it a little bit more challenging to determine the number in between those big ranges. So grid lines may have helped that out a little bit further. Another area of unclearness was that every single day it seemed that the key colors changed. So one day maybe social media was blue, but then the next day was orange. So making sure that you're looking at that key as your individual, but then also for that IOA as well, to understand that the colors are changing and make sure you're getting that accurate IOA representation that we need for this study to make sure that we're following as such. So those were some of the different technological and ambiguity limitations. The other one would be just a lack of outside researchers and or observers. So the original study, they had their participants and they had their researchers / observers. So in this study of the replication, we acted as all parties. As a result, there is the potential of some implicit bias on our behalf. So we've read this study countless times. We know exactly what the hypotheses are. We know what the data show. We know what the results were, expectations, all of those things. And so if we are collecting data or studying, we could have implicitly or unconsciously been affecting our data to make sure that we are in line with what is happening without even realizing what we're doing. So having those outside observers kind of gets rid of that area. Another would be they can help control the study environments a little bit better. So right now we are all over the Eastern Standard Time Zone with different phones, different study materials, loud noise, white noise, outside, inside. And in studies, you really need to work on controlling your intervention environment to really make sure that you're looking at those causal relations and making sure there's nothing going on else in that environment that is affecting your studying habits. So since we are acting as both parties, that means that that control is a little bit less than. So for some recommendations based on these limitations would be to have those outside observers. So making sure that they are there to help collect screen time. So through a one-way mirror or something like that to make sure that we are on track, and that kind of gets rid of the ambiguity of smartphone calculators. Again, the technological issues with the Forced Focus app, having a better timer to utilize to kind of get rid of that technological errors. Another way would be to kind of help make clearer the issues that we had specifically with the intervention treatment fidelity. So with that 92%, there were protocol and procedures and steps in there that were unclear. We equally didn't understand them, didn't grasp them the way in which they should have been grasped given the wording. And so having another researcher who has experience, maybe this is their study and they're replicating them themselves, they kind of know what to expect. So having those outside researchers would be a great benefit for any type of future replications of these studies. And that is the end of our presentation. Thank you guys for listening. We look forward to seeing your comments, suggestions, and questions, and kind of furthering the discussion with you further. Thank you again for listening.